This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Two of the newest members of the County Commission talk priorities and politics tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by two newly elected members of the County Commission, Van Turner, Democrat from District 12. Thank you for being here. And George Chisholm, Republican from District 2. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Also with me, Bill Dries, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. We will talk through a range of issues tonight, but let's just start simply, and I'll start with you, George. Your priorities, what you see the most important issue or issues facing the County Commission that you have just been elected to.
Well, you know, we've only had a couple of meetings, and obviously the Ebola scare, whether it's a scare or not, we've talked about it briefly before the cameras, but you know, that's something that's come before us. We've had the CDC director come in, Methodist, the Region 1, Med, Baptist experts, and tell us where we are, and I think we're in good shape for Shelby County. The second thing is, you know, the security, some of the things that are going on, you know, with the teenagers, you know, with the technology they have. Director Armstrong was in front of us, Sheriff Oldham, Attorney General Wyrick. You know, people are concerned about that, safety, education, and health. Those are the three big things. So education would be the third thing that's coming up, but probably the most important that I see, because that's educating our children. Van and I went just yesterday to a school, technology school, that's doing some great things. So those are the things I see.
All right, we're going to come back to all those, but let me just, that's a good overview. Van, your take, the priorities that the County Commission faces.
All those things that Commissioner Chisholm indicated are priorities for me as well, but also job growth. I think we need to make sure that we're attracting businesses into Shelby County and that we're offering opportunities for our young students who are graduating. I think that's key, and that really relates to education as well as public safety. I think it relates to so much, so I think a healthy focus on job growth is a priority for me as well.
Let's talk first about education, come back to that. This will be, we've had this evolving school situation, but this year it's a little different than last year because the suburban schools are now fully independent, fully established. They'll be coming to you all for funding to some degree. How do you see that? What is the best process? There was some complaints last year on some of the capital money and how some people complained, probably some people in the suburbs complained too much of that went to the legacy Memphis schools. How do you, I'll start with you, George, how do you see a fair approach and assessment of school funding needs given, you know, an era of maybe limited budgets?
Well, you know, every budget's, you know, tight right now. The municipal systems, I think, you know, their superintendents will get together. They have a great relationship with each other. They work well with each other. And I think they will submit kind of a budget that they've all agreed upon, that they've worked through. So it won't be, you know, 7 or 8 different budgets that we'll have to consider and go through.
So you'll look to them to prioritize between a roof in Bartlett and a new gym in Collierville?
Sure, because those superintendents, they're in touch with their principals each day. They have a better understanding than we do of what their needs are. Now then certainly we'll review their needs and look and see what actual dollars are available to fix those problems.
And I should say that your district, you cover Collierville. Give your district area.
My district area is Collierville, Fisherville, Leeds, and then parts of Cordova.
Okay. And for you, Van, you're covering southeast Shelby County, is that correct? The funding and that balance now that the County Commission, the schools are all established, everything's pretty clear cut. What is the best approach? You want to see any change of the approach of how that school funding goes through the County Commission?
Well, we all watched that process play out. George and I were not on the commission at the time, so we want to do what's fair and equitable for all the students here in Shelby County. On the Shelby County Commission, we're responsible for educating all kids within the county, so we want to make sure that the funding gets to where the needs are. Of course, the the legacy Memphis City school system, which is now the Shelby County school system mostly, is where the bulk of the students are in the county. But we do understand that there are improvements and there are needs for the students outside of the county. So again, we want to have a fair process, equitable process, and I think that it can work out.
Is most of your district covered by the legacy Memphis City Schools, or is it a mix?
It's a mix.
Okay.
I'm unincorporated.
Okay.
There's an unincorporated part to my district as well, but most of it is covered by the legacy Memphis City school system.
Okay. We'll come back to that, but Bill, go ahead.
And to what degree does average daily attendance and that split kind of do some of the work here for the commission, Van?
Yeah. From my understanding, for instance, we have a $120 million bond that's about to be issued, and it's mostly for capital improvements. So when money comes in for the students, it follows where the students are. I mean, the money goes where the students are, but when you have capital improvements, those are decisions outside of where the students are attending school, and that's basically, I think, a call by all the experts and the commission seeing where those needs are. When I looked at the initial bond deal, it appears that many schools need new roofs. And so, you're going to see capital improvements in the new school systems as well as within the legacy Memphis City school systems. There's improvements to the buildings and those kinds of things. But I think we have to separate those two. When the monies are for the students, that money should follow the student. But when you're looking at capital improvements, I mean, it's really a question of need and trying to address the most timely needs that are out there, when we look at the issue.
Mm-hmm. George, prior to this commission taking office, the outlook on this philosophically among commissioners in the past had been, okay, we kind of take care of what the city council doesn't take care of. That has really changed. In fact, that may be the most important change that we've seen with this new commission taking office in particular. How do you look at the basic duties of this? Is this county commission just supposed to take care of in the city what the council doesn't get around to?
Bill, I'm not an expert on that by any means, but we've got Dorsey Hobson, we got Kevin Woods, we got good leaders now. I think we're in the best shape that we can get in for the system for today, and looking forward to the future. I do think there are things that are going to fall on the county commission that have not in the past, simply because of some of the problems or within the city schools, within the city of Memphis government. So I think it's going to be different. It's going to be a new, we're going to have to think outside the box a little bit to do some things to get some of the funding that we need. People forget there's a lot more than just the municipal school system, the Shelby County school system. We have other entities that are educating children, whether it's through charter, some of their schools that are going. So, I saw yesterday in the paper, where 6 more schools are going to change.
Yeah.
So that affects not only the parents, the children, the teachers, the administrators. It's going to change quite a few things. So,
and those 6 schools, it could be as many as 12, I think, that the ASD, the state entity that takes over failing schools and is taking over failing schools throughout the state, Chris Barbuck, who's been on the show before. Are you comfortable with the way that works? And I'll start with you because you brought it up, but I also want to get Van's perspective. Are you comfortable? Because the county commission, in that case, the county is funding these schools and they don't have anywhere near as much say over them because the ASD is stepping in and either taking control of them or handing them over to an outside charter school to operate.
The knee-jerk reaction to that is, run things like you would your household budget.
Right.
You may run yours different. Van may run his a little bit different than I run my household. But anytime that you've got funds that you're overseeing that now maybe you don't have as much control over, you worry about that. Your thoughts are on that. But at the same point, these are people who have been vetted and looked at, and hopefully they're doing the right thing to run these, that run these systems, these schools.
Your take on that, the ASDs specifically, but also other charter schools, that funding, there less control for the county commission when you write those checks and hand that money over.
Yeah, with the ASD process, I'm not entirely comfortable with the process. I receive phone calls and there are concerns about how that process is going. I mean, the issue is you're taking failing schools, and so there are schools that are not doing as well as the ones that are being taken over. So I think you really have to look at what's really behind what's happening.
Yeah.
I know that the ASD process is still evolving, and so
Right.
that's probably some of the where
Right.
the issues are as well. But you know, I'm not entirely comfortable with the process. Many of these schools are within the core of the city, Whitehaven, Southeast Shelby.
Right.
And so I think we need to make sure that, you know, if the ASD schools were performing a lot better than, you know, what the schools are doing now, I could see it, but I don't think that's been the case thus far. So when the schools are taking over, you don't see this
Right.
huge bump.
Right.
So I am concerned, and we'll have to take a closer look
Right.
at those
and
issues.
we'll have Chris Barbick, the head of that ASD effort, on in the next couple of weeks, and we'll ask him those questions. Bill.
Right.
Van, let me go back to you on this whole idea of what the commission's scope is and where that intersects with what happens within the city of Memphis. Your district is in both. It's in unincorporated Shelby County. It's in the city of Memphis. What is the commission's role in what happens in Memphis?
Well, I think, you know, the role historically has been to work with the city, and you know, the commission has to work with all the cities. Someone asked me that the other day. I mean, luckily, we're not on the front line of any of the municipalities. All of the municipal governments have either an alderman body that represents it, or a city council, of course, which represents Memphis. So I think we're there to assist all of the municipalities in what has to be done. Directly, you know, we fund education. We cover the jails. We cover the courts. So there are things which we have the initial responsibility of covering. But I think outside of that, we're here to complement all the municipal governments. And I really, when you look at it again, with Memphis being the largest government or the largest municipality in the commission, I mean, I think, you know, that will deserve a little more focus, if you will, than some of the other municipalities. But that doesn't mean we neglect all the other municipalities. You know, I'm of the opinion that we really do need to move forward as one county. We really do need to, you know, get beyond some of the racial issues that we've had in the past and really move this county forward. I have children. George has children. We don't want our kids fighting these same battles that we're having to fight now.
At the outset, the commission had what I'll call a moment here, where you all discuss the committee slate of assignments, and Commissioner Bailey made his point of view, his objection to the committee slate, or his concerns about it, pretty succinctly, and the commission voted on that to delay it once, and then approved it just this past week. Went ahead and approved the slate. What do you think that was about?
Well, you know, I think that Commissioner Bailey has been on the commission a long time. I'm 39 years old. He's been on the commission 39 years. So he doesn't like me to say that. But I mean, the point is, he's seen many things happen on the commission. And, you know, I think out of respect, he thought that the makeup of some of the committee chairs should have perhaps looked differently. And so he asked for that item to be returned to committee. It returned to committee. He stated his reasons, and you know, it passed. And so, you know, I think as our senior statesman on the commission, if he wants to have a second look at something, do a little more due diligence, he should be, you know, afforded that opportunity. He was afforded that opportunity, and you know, and the committee chair appointments have now been ratified by the commission, and we're moving forward. That doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, he won't bring other issues up, that we all won't bring other issues up from time to time, but I think we're probably past that bump in the road.
George, your take on that? I mean, new to the county commission like Van, was that petty politics? Was it frustrating, or was it just part of the process that you had to get through?
Well, you know, Commissioner Bailey is a legend around here. I don't have a great relationship. I just don't have a relationship, period. I'm older than Van, but I'm not quite to where Commissioner Bailey is. But I think if you take one part of it and the other part, you know, somewhere in the middle is about where it was. Commissioner Bailey wasn't able to be at the committee meetings, and he wanted to revisit that. I think we needed to do that. I didn't see anything wrong with that, but I think maybe Some of the media might have blown that up a little bit more. Some of the Republicans might have blown it up a little bit more.
Well, and let's talk about Republicans and Democrats.
Okay.
So part of that fight was that there were Republicans supporting a Democratic head of the commission, which has happened before. Bill pointed out in
Sure.
a recent article that this is the third time. Does at the local, at the county commission level, does it particularly matter that you're a Democrat and you're a Republican? Is that important to how the commission should get its business done?
That's a yes or no question. I think the commissioners, let's say the commissioners that have been on before, have a little more of an agenda than maybe some of us coming on new. Some of us that are coming on new, some of us haven't been involved in politics a lot, but we've been active in our communities and active in Shelby County. And I don't mean just our communities, multiple areas that we've been involved in. So part of that was party politics.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the Ebola. It might have been blown up just a little bit more than what we needed.
What we need. In your take, Van, when you look at that, you were former head of the Democratic Shelby County Democratic Party. Where are those priorities in terms of your party affiliation, representing your constituency, and representing the whole county? How do you balance that?
No, at one point in time, from my understanding, the county commission, I don't know if it's always been partisan. I know it's partisan now, but at least in past times, we haven't had the very contentious party battles like we have now. So but we're faced with that reality now, and the fact of the matter is, that's what we're dealing with. So, if you're going to run countywide as a Democrat or Republican, you have to some extent, satisfy your base of voters who are Republicans and who are Democrats. So, and of course, those philosophies play out more keenly and acutely on a national level and a state level, but not so much locally. And we understand that, but because we are in an environment where we do have these partisan elections, you have to respect that fact, and you have to navigate it. But and on down in the future, if we don't have these local partisan elections, and you might not have it as much. But right now, that's what we're faced with. George ran as Republican, I ran as a Democrat. I don't think that's going to change in 4 years. And so we have to return to the base of voters and ask for their nomination to represent the party at this level. So that's something we got to deal with right now.
Interesting. We'll come back to some election things, but both of you have mentioned crime in different contexts, and we did have the incident, the Kroger incident, and another incident after a football game. The county commission doesn't have direct control of the police force in Memphis, obviously, but you mentioned the courts and the jails and so on. But from your seat, maybe George, representing Collierville, the suburbs, that the impact of that event on. We're all dragged down by that, I assume everyone would say, because even if you're in Collierville and you're 30 miles away or 20 miles away or 10 miles away, the perception and the drag on economic development, the kind of the black eye for the city and the city as a whole. What would you like the county commission to do about something that was an incident in Memphis?
Well, we were talking, we have these single districts now. So, I'm very in touch with my district. But if it's good for Collierville, or good for Fraser, or even around Crump Stadium, if it's good for there, the security's not good there, I'm off a little bit, but indifferent, let's say, it's good for Collierville. We don't need the negative publicity. We don't need that. We need to all pull together, and I think that's what this commission's starting to do. There are some leaders within these communities. Eddie Jones, Commissioner Jones, has been extremely involved down in his district. But how do you solve that? I don't know. We had the director of the Memphis Police Department, Shelby County, the Attorney General, and they're working on that. I don't think it's a quick fix. With technology today, kids can send out an email, we're going to meet in 10 minutes at this location, and 500 of them can show up. That's pretty quick. But your initial question, is it if it's good for Memphis, is it good for Collierville? Yes. Yeah. And what because we're dependent. Look, you come to Collierville tomorrow morning and look at the taillights that are headed into Memphis to work, whether it's at the Met. We've got
or vice
to be
versa.
together.
It can go both ways. And crime. What would you like to see from the seat of a county commissioner and the control you have and don't have? What would you like to see done differently in terms of approach to crime?
I think it's multifaceted. I think, again, I would imagine that most of the crime would happen in the summer. school is out and our students have all day, and you know, they're not having to report to class. And so a summer job program is something that I think would be very helpful. You know, giving the young students in the community things to do, constructive things to do. And I think that's something that we all have to focus on. And I believe, as Commissioner Chisholm has stated, I mean, what affects us in Memphis will affect Collierville, Germantown, and all the entire county. So the commission, working with the city council, the city officials, to come up with constructive ways to combat youth violence in our community is a priority, and it's something that we really have to start focusing on.
And Bill, about 5 minutes left in the show.
And one of the debates with the whole reaction to the quote-unquote mob attacks has been the sense that there is really a different day in terms of the response. Let's sort out who is a ringleader, who behaved violently, versus who was just a kid who was just running around with the rest of the kids there on the parking lot. And that really seems to be different. In the past, when we've had incidents roughly similar to this, the response has always been get tough, lock as many of them up as possible, and make an example out of them. Do you sense a difference?
Of course. And General Wyrick, I think, just did another initiative with the gangs, and I think this is the second time she's done that. I think that's what you have to do. You have to be strategic. You have to be surgical in how you address this. So just condemning everyone, I think, is not the answer, but surgically going in, finding the gang leaders, finding the ones that are really out to do harm to this community, taking them off the streets is the key. And then having constructive programs for those who are sort of on the line and bringing them back on the good side is the other part of that equation.
Right. And this whole incident got the commission, I think, into something that the commission would have been into at some point anyway, because the commission oversees juvenile court's budget as well. And Dan Michael is the new juvenile court judge. I'd like for each of you to just talk a little bit about where you see that relationship going. George, let's start with you on that.
Could you be a little more as far as?
In terms of the budget that he needs, he's talked some about the detention facility possibly needing an upgrade there in the juvenile court building. Do you know yet if that's going to be something in the budget?
I don't know as far as how much that's going to be in the budget. I obviously saw, probably like y'all, where the kids are smashing the sprinkler heads with a shoe, and that opens up all the cells. So obviously some of the systems down there may be a little antiquated or behind the times a little bit. So upgrades are definitely needed. Of course, upgrades cost funds, and that's what we're talking about. How do we prioritize that? Well, I'm anxious to see how they suggest, to prioritize and what their funding needs to be, to fix those problems that are probably existing because of lack of funding over the years, or putting funding somewhere else.
Van, what's the commission's relationship with juvenile court in your view, from your perspective?
Of course, we know the history with Commissioner Brooks and the whole Department of Justice issue, which is still ongoing. So I think supporting the effort to make sure that the local juvenile court system is as compliant as possible with what the Department of Justice is saying needs to happen is a point that we need to make sure happens, but also giving Judge Michael and all those folks there in juvenile court what they need to make sure that they can accomplish the task at hand. So I think that's something that we need to look at it as a commission. That's really the point where a child or a student can go one way or go the other. We want them to come back and be a integral, positive part of society and not end up at 201 Poplar with a lifelong career in crime. So that's really a key there, and we need to bring as many of those young ones back to a constructive, positive existence as possible. So I think we need to do what we can to support Judge Michael and all those guys working hard down there.
part of just a couple minutes left in the show, but part of what you're talking about improvements. Let's talk about money, and that's talking about funding, and then we're into taxes and spending and managing that. One criticism, and it's happened more on the city level because of the fight, specifically to the city of Memphis, the fight over benefits with the fire department, EMTs, and police, but are pilots and pilot incentive plans for industry. You know, they go out and they cause a lot of stress for people, and there's a lot of differing opinions on it. What is your take? And you talked about economic development and growth. That's been a big strategy in Memphis and Shelby County, is pilot programs in terms of competition with is the pilot program working? Would you like to see changes to it?
Right. And I've been involved, full disclosure, with that program in the past with my practice, but I think it is a good program. I think the issue is not necessarily the incentives, but the compliance. If you say you're going to have so many jobs, if you're going to do X, Y, and Z, then you should do it. And I think, you know, making sure that companies say they're going to do what they're going to do to get the pilot is where we have to focus on.
Do you feel like there's a new regime, this EDGE program, Reed Dahlberg has been on the show a number of times, do you feel like they are doing a better job than the previous setup in terms of making sure the pilots are compliant?
Yeah, I think they will. There's a more focus on that, and I think they will do a better job because they're focused on making sure that these companies are compliant. DeSoto is aggressive, Arkansas is aggressive. We have to compete, so we have to have that program.
Your take on the pilot program, do you like to see any changes to it?
I agree with Commissioner Turner. The specifics, you know, if they're going to create 150 jobs, well, used to as 150 jobs, well, will those minimum, you know, wage jobs or what? Now they're being a little more specific on what the jobs would be, the technology that's going to be needed for those jobs, you know, and getting local, you know, Shelby County people back to work, getting those in those jobs, and I think that's a priority.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about DeSoto County competition. Your area competes against Fayette County, correct?
Correct, and you know, it's, you know, they've put in rail lines and things.
Right.
They're getting in a position aggressively to go after these companies, so we have to respond to that.
Okay, George Chisholm, Van Turner, Bill Dries, thank you all for being here. Enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us. Join us again next week. Good night.